So I guess I'll call the Land Use Working Group Municipal Office Consolidation Subcommittee to order. Um, Paul, I'll just call a roll. Say your, say your,
I'm here.
yes, I am too. So we have a quorum and we can proceed with the meeting. The first thing is public comment. Is there anyone who has a public comment that they'd like to share with us? Okay. Um, Then next item is the approval of available meeting minutes. Do we have, Paul, I missed the last meeting. Do you know where we are with the meeting minutes? You mentioned you're going to take minutes today, and I'm grateful for that. Do we
So we
have,
had minutes from October 1st that were ready for the last meeting, but since you weren't there, we decided to hold off. And then the minutes from the last meeting, Tracy was taking. I haven't seen those. So there are two sets of minutes that we probably should wait till we're all, so, and then there'll be three with this one. So the next meeting there'll be a backlog of 3 minutes. So I don't know how you want to deal with all these.
okay, who's up to be the chair next meeting? Is it you?
I don't know. Yes, yeah. I'll raise my hand. I'll be the chair.
Okay, do you want to shepherd these minutes for the next
Yeah,
meeting? Okay. Because
yeah,
yeah, I didn't see the minutes in the packet. So if you want to shepherd that, if you need help from me, just let me know. Okay.
yeah. Having a three-person subcommittee is we're chair, but chair, vice chair, and clerks at the same time.
Right, exactly. So, okay. But we got to make sure that we keep these minutes up because once we get behind, they just kind of
Yeah.
get away
Okay.
from us.
So
And
I'll
then,
make sure we have 3 minutes to review beforehand and approve at the meeting.
okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. And again, if you need help, let me know. The next item on the agenda is to debrief the quarterly report to the select board. And since you and I we're both on the select board, so I guess we should just talk out loud about what we thought of that quarterly review. You want to start?
Great job, guys. I think the discussion about what happens next was kind of well, there are two discussions. What happens next? And the interfaces with other activities such as MCI Concord, neither of which were completely resolved. But I
Yep.
think the discussion, Sven, about how this phase blends into the next phase was interesting. You know, I think we haven't fully worked that out yet, but I think that's something we probably need to think about a little bit more in the entire group, so we can kind of articulate that a little bit more crisply, assuming we can come up with a plan. Um, but as far as the status of where we are, I think
You mean
we're
you
well along
mean
in the process, and I think I think there was a question when the recommendations would be forthcoming from the entire group, and I forgot what the answer was to that. So I think there are a couple of loose ends on the whole discussion, not surprisingly, because there are lots of loose ends. So that's my thought. Good progress, loose ends, TBD.
Yeah, my read on what we heard the other night was a good grounding. And I heard Sven ask us to be patient. We're in the data collection mode right now. And I think we have a clear understanding of what we need to do once we get the data. Well, clear understanding might be overstating it, but I think we see the challenge. And we are in data collecting mode right now. And we know that from our own experience, Paul, that you and I and Tracy are still collecting a lot of data. So, but the other point that you bring up, Paul, which is how does the MCI advisory boards work, the select boards work, and the land use working group work, integrate, is something that I think we need to address. Maybe at our full land use working group meeting or some kind of an update that yes, we are in fact integrated with them. It seems like the direction that the MCI advisory board is taking as far as uh, the some use for municipal purposes of that parcel is something that we are actively interested in or actively engaged with. So having a better understanding of how we all integrate and how decisions and recommendations are going to be made, I think is important.
Yeah. And just for everybody, that conversation not only happening amongst us and the working group, it's happening amongst the select board as well. So I mean, there's on both ends, there's a need to kind of bring these two efforts in sync, if not some kind of merging.
Yeah. The other thing that we talked briefly about the budget, and I floated this idea of getting more money and nobody wanted it.
Yeah. What was that about?
Yeah. So, okay. But I think, at least during this conversation that we had this morning, I'd like to have a better idea of where we are with the RFPs for Peabody, not only the environmental assessment, but what will it cost to bring that up to code? Maybe that's something we have during the general meeting. Yeah, I don't know, but I think it's been something we've talked about, but I don't know the status. Does anybody here on this
Well,
call
then,
know
let
the
me just, I
status?
think that, I think there are three pieces to that. There was the environmental assessment that we've
Right.
talked about. There was the building condition assessment. And then I guess there was, a cost analysis. So, I mean, the third is related to the second, but I think we needed
Yes.
to do a separate, have a group come in and look at that building and, determine what needed to be done. I mean, Russ has done a lot of that, but I think we could benefit from you know, a new set of eyes on that.
I agree. Russ, you're on the call. I see it. Can you tell me the status of the RFP for the environmental conditions? Have we issued that?
No, the only reason we haven't got that done is just because of workload. We're running 110% on my side. And so we will get to that. We have people for that, but it wasn't like an imperative thing. We know there's some asbestos in there. We know there's some of this and that. It's just the extent and finding a cost. Um, as far as assessments, and Judith, weigh in, please, on this one. Without a plan for the use, we really don't know what assessment to get. We're sort of shooting at fish in a barrel. And the you may have an assessment done for one use and you go and do another use. Now that money's all for naught. So Judith, if you weigh in on that, I still think we could move forward at some point if we decide to use the building. I think we should have some structural testing done because some questions have come up recently, which I think we can respond to in a positive way. I don't mind some going ahead and doing some selective structural testing. But on every walk we've gone through, we haven't identified any structural failure in that building. But yeah,
Let me ask you, regardless of reuse, isn't uh, the bringing the building up to code?
Right.
Um, I guess that's somewhat dependent on whether school code for an office or code for a school or some combination of the two, and then condition of the roof and HVAC. Aren't some of those sort of independent of the final use?
depends on what you're going to use it for. You're going to do your HVAC layout a different way if it's storage versus a classroom versus a daycare versus other uses. Form follows function, right? That's what we all go back to. And if we don't know what the function is going to be, we can't adjust the form. Lost my train of thought, Paul.
I think our co-chairs have their hands raised. So
Yeah,
But
okay.
let's hear from Judith and Sven. Sven, you raised yours first. You want to go?
Yeah, I think is we have to address that sooner than later.
Yeah.
We know it's either kind of an office use, it's either a preschool use, which is not as stringent as a school use. I haven't heard that we're using it as a school. But if you're looking at the scenarios, you could look at the code requirements for office and preschool and make an analysis what is needed to bring this thing up to code and what are deficiencies and get a ballpark number. out of this.
Yeah, and look, I misspoke. It's not a school. I meant preschool, or the transference of Ripley preschool types of
Yeah,
things.
so preschools, I moved the whole school, inclusive a preschool in the past, back in California, and I only know the code in California, but I assume it's probably roughly a similar structure and similar way that preschool codes are not as stringent as school codes. But still, we need to know what needs to be done given the age of the building, given that we know this is kind of non-reinforced concrete, given there's some questions around roof load and other things, and these could generate significant cost. And we rather know that earlier, what it need to bring to code and spending on design and then get a surprise at the end. That would be my Sven view. So I leave it with that.
Thank you, Sven. Judith, what would you like to say?
Thank you, Mary. Always appreciate the Sven view, by the way. That's always a great place to start. So I just wanted to mention with regard to Russ's, sort of comment about staging and who's dealing with the environmental assessment and all that sort of stuff, which is a great point for both Mary and Russ to have raised. So I think in general, we're trying to be smart about the 150,000 that we have in front of us to spend, right, on various studies and so forth. And from the 3 different subgroups, we are getting requests for data and studies and so forth. So for example, on a smaller scale cost side, we need to do formal market evaluations of some of the properties, and that's going to cost, probably $10,000, $12,000 to do those. We have been talking about doing an impact analysis study that would give us more definitive numbers with regard to population increase over the next 10 to 20 years, but also impact of population increase on schools, on fire, on police, on water, sewer, all that kind of stuff. So that's probably going to cost maybe another $20,000 to do that kind of study. So I think at this point, Sven and I have been trying to wrap our minds around what are the most likely items that we would need to do an outside study for. How quickly do those studies need to be delivered, right? Because Peabody that train's running a little bit faster than some of the other trains, right, that we're working on. And just trying to make sure that we don't spend money or allocate money at this stage in the process when we're really trying to understand all 3 groups' needs. We don't want to spend money that would end up not being required later on, right, which would be the worst case scenario, but also maybe crowding out some studies that we will need later on. So just speaking from the public safety point of view, we are going to have to do some preliminary work on better understanding the condition of the 2 fire stations, but also doing some preliminary design work to try to understand how those might fit on other parcels as well, right? So there's all these little bits and pieces that may get us to that 150 mark quickly. And we just want to be careful with the town's money. So all of that said, I think the environmental assessment we've already agreed to as a group. And I think, Russ, if I can be of help with constructing the RFP and helping with that, I'm happy to do so. I think the building condition and cost analysis we can tie together. And in fact, I just identified a couple of firms that have done a fair bit of school, a fair bit of work consulting with municipalities who have older schools and are looking at reuse scenarios for those schools. Now, we have a fairly clear idea of what our reuse scenario might look like, which is going to make that project a little bit easier. But there certainly are firms, engineering and architecture firms, that can come in and do, I think, a pretty good assessment of what it will realistically cost, not only to bring it up to code, but to identify any structural issues that may not be, readily, I mean, they might be apparent to Russ, but they may not necessarily be apparent to the rest of us. The roof and all these other kinds of things that may, that if they're fine, they're fine. But if they're not fine, that really changes the budget for the project. And when it changes the budget for the project, it changes how we evaluate different options. So I think we can come back to the land use working group full meeting, which I don't know when the next one is. Shannon, I think it's
A week from this Friday.
a week from this Friday. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we could probably come back. Sven and I had mentioned that we wanted to put this on the agenda and come back to the full committee and say, here's currently the list of studies that we think we would need to do across the various, across the three subgroups. Here's what we think they would cost approximately. Which ones do we want to decide that we want to go ahead with now versus which ones do we want to wait until a later stage? So that's a very long way of helping everybody understand that we're thinking about it. And we would like to take some action on that at our next meeting.
Let me bring this back, Mary. So we're not designing the project here. We're coming up with a recommendation. And how detailed does this have to be? We have a lot of examples from other towns. We have ranges of estimates on a square foot basis. We could put a range right now into our analysis with other ranges that we have, because if we have the perfect number here, we're going to comparing it against ranges. We're not going to have a set of perfect numbers. So I'm just wondering how deeply we need to go into the condition assessment here, when we probably have a good idea of ranges right now. And those ranges probably, I think, would probably cover all situations. And to the point about what the reuse is, the planned reuse hypothetically is to move all the offices and all the preschools and council on aging into this structure. Now, will that all happen at once or in stages? Not sure, but so that's the scenario that we're thinking about right now, Russ. So we do have a pretty hypothetical idea of what the reuse could be.
Paul, I think that given that Peabody seems to be or was the front runner for the consolidation receiving site, and it's generated some conversation within the town. And also, we knew right from the get-go that we had a challenge explaining to the community that a building we thought wasn't good enough for the school could be good enough for offices and senior centers and preschool. So I think it's a good idea to put some effort into getting not an accurate, but a better number towards Peabody for Peabody. I know the other things we have as possibilities, Ripley and maybe leasing buildings, maybe that's not as important. But I think because Peabody, again, it was the front runner, and it's generated quite a bit of conversation in the town. I'd feel better about going in with a number.
I think that's a good point.
I'm
And
sorry.
I think, reflecting on what I just said, I think we have ranges right now that get us comfortable, I think, in asking for the more detail. If we had an estimate right now which said this is impossible, you're right, we wouldn't go to the next step. But I think we have the ranges right now, which puts us in the ballpark of feasibility and plausibility. And I think so that would lead to a more detailed assessment, Mary. I'm just thinking out loud here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I see, Russ, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify so that we're all talking about the same thing when we're speaking about Peabody and the building code. The Peabody falls under the existing building code, which is largely made up of prescriptive measures to determine suitability moving forward. It's not a clean, cut and dry, take out the chapter of the building code as applies to the Peabody. It will have to have a full assessment per that code under any kind of design we do. So at the end of the day, an engineer or an architect, well, both, will attest to the suitability, non-suitability for the building. So I just want to, there's different codes we're working with. So if people are looking at one code and they're expecting something, the existing building code will control this building's construction and design.
Actually, I'm confused now, Russ. I think we've got a good idea of the uses that we're considering for that building, right? That's
Right.
Office, preschool, council on aging, right?
Agreed.
And we also know that we need to be confident about the overall condition of the building, right?
Agreed.
So, I don't know, what you just said kind of confused me as far as there's different codes. So can't we get some study done that would answer these questions? Is it, what's it going to cost to bring it up to code for these uses, and what would it cost to make sure that the integrity of the entire structure is there? And that I think is what I would be confident. If we were to recommend Peabody, I would need that to be confident that that was the right thing to do.
So I've been floating around the idea of having a structural engineering or testing lab come in and doing some structural evaluation on a
Yeah.
building generally for suitability for reuse at a very low level. Doing some concrete strength testing, which would be a destructive test method. We'd have to cut a hole in the building and test the concrete. This is all part of the existing building code anyways. It wouldn't be money lost on us, but it would get us to a point where you guys are more comfortable, I think. Judith can weigh in on that as well.
Well, go ahead, Judith. Do you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure exactly what the specific question was there, Russ. I mean, like the idea that you could do structural.
Yeah, just an overview, a structural overview of the building by a registered engineer, and get a testing lab in, because people have come through the building and looked at plans and talking about what was in the plan is a 3,000 PSI without getting too technical. I'm sure the building's a lot higher than that, but just to do some structural testing, to have some documented data by a licensed professional as we're discussing, instead of, we all have opinions. So how much should we put out there?
I agree. I think that's easy to do. And I also think there's probably a midpoint that I think, or there's a point along the spectrum of the degree of analysis, right? So Paul's quite right to say, well, kind of, don't we know a lot of the parameters? So we maybe don't need a full-blown cost analysis, but Mary's quite right that I think we need some specific numbers, particularly around the idea of once the range of cost starts to hit the point at which building a new building is either the same cost or less than the upper bound of the range, that you need to know that, right? And so I think there are plenty of firms that can do a building condition, quick structural, and cost scenario analysis that would do both code and then overall, is this a good idea? And I think that's probably the outside opinion that we need at this point. And it doesn't need to be, I mean, we're not talking about a $200,000 analysis here. We're talking about something that I'm hoping would be in the range of like 20. I could be wrong. Like I said, I have some feelers out, so I'll be able to have better information by next week.
Okay. Sven, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think from my brain, it seems to be very straightforward, is to say, what is the gap between what a building is today and the potential code requirements given the uses we know. So this is a laundry list, and we come perhaps up to, I don't know, 10 points where we say that we identify a certain gap. And this is then we have to get a very quick sense on let's say these 10 gap points. What is a potential price point against that, or order of magnitude, and what are potential mitigations that could avoid or reduce that price point? And I think that can be done very quickly. And if then you need to drill a hole in the wall to figure out what it is for mitigation, that also can be done. But I think we need to have a clear view. What is the potential gap to what the building is today to what the code requirements are for the uses we contemplate here?
So let me get back to the general discussion here about the need. I'm not opposed to getting the best information we have, but you will see when we look at the matrix, we have debits and we have positive and negative. So if we're going to make an argument to spend X dollars to renovate Peabody, we need to talk about the dollars we're going to generate in revenues, right? Because the economic analysis is going to hinge on whether that makes sense. If we have the best possible numbers in Peabody, and we have imperfect numbers on the other side, I'm just worried about comparing fresh apples to rotten apples or something like that. It's just, and maybe I'm overthinking it because I know that Judith, you and I have talked about land appraisals, and right now we have some ranges that we'll talk about, but we don't have numbers. I mean, the ranges are significant in terms of if we sell a piece of land, what it would be used for. So we have imperfect information on the revenue side, and we will. And so to have perfect information on the debit side, I'm not opposed to getting it, but we have a constraint in the accuracy of our economic analysis, I think. We will have a constraint, Mary.
It's gonna be based on assumptions, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
assumptions are imperfect. We know that. We can, any future looking economic analysis has some level of inaccuracy. I just kind of want to repeat what I said before. I think because Peabody is under such people are much more concerned about Peabody, and I think answering those questions, if we want to go ahead with that as a recommendation, something we need to have. And I hear Judith saying that she's got firms that can do this. It can be done in pretty short order, but it will be up to them to decide whether that's something they want to allocate their limited budget on. I would like to see that happen. Um, and I'd like to see it happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I'd like to see that too, but I think at the same time, focusing on Peabody, we're going to need some pretty accurate appraisal numbers, right?
For
Because
the other things, oh yeah, yeah,
no, just for Peabody, if you focus, Peabody is a bit of people have a lot of interest in Peabody, right?
right,
For a variety
right,
of reasons. So the options of converting it for municipal use versus selling it to
right.
generate revenues, I think we need both of those numbers pretty accurately on Peabody. So I think
Okay,
I'm just saying
okay,
we
that's
need
fair.
the building numbers, but we need also, Judith, the appraisal numbers. We need to understand what it would be to sell that property. Not that we're, not that we're going to do that, but those are the two ends of the spectrum. For
Right.
Peabody, we may need lesser appraisal data on other properties. I don't know.
Um, I think this might be a good point for us to just ground ourselves on what our approach is going forward. And I think we talked about this the last time I was at the meeting, which is this is an economic analysis or an economic decision, I feel. And we need to start by looking at what are the costs going forward 5 to 10 years for the status quo, which is, we just everybody stays where they are. We have all these operational expenses. And then what would be the cash flows going forward if we were to consolidate at one of these various, or maybe several of the sites we have under consideration. So I think we've got some information now. When we look at the matrix to actually do what are the cash flows going forward with a status quo scenario. What do you think, Paul?
Um, I have to think about that. The status quo. Say
It's
more about that. Meaning, if we just what does status quo mean? 5 to 10 years status quo.
we don't consolidate. We stay where we are. We've got these um, operating costs for these
Okay.
buildings. We've got
Yeah.
the costs for the staff traveling. We've got these types of costs. So all the benefits we're looking to achieve by consolidation, we don't have any of those. It's status quo, and then we need to compare that to what would the cash flows be. Let's just think through Peabody for a minute, right? We consolidate to Peabody, right? We've got to spend some money to bring it up to, I hate to bring it up to code or whatever that means in order to, have it house what we hope to house there. What are the savings that what would be the cash flows of that scenario? And then we simply compare the two. Um, and maybe another scenario is this, instead of going to Peabody, we, sell the land or so then we get into what are the scenarios and what's the incremental change in cash flow between the status quo and this particular.
Yeah, we certainly have. Russ has updated the operational costs, and I think
Yeah, good.
that,
Okay.
and so I think we have a good handle on just on the operational side. I don't think on the quantifying the productivity side. I don't know what else we need to define the status quo economically, but we should think about that.
Yeah. So, but that's the framework that I was hoping to
Yeah.
do. So I guess now might be a good time to look at the matrix and see what are the holes and what are some things that we need to kind of chase down. And do you want to pull it up, Paul?
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll make it. Is this big enough for people to see?
I don't see it yet. There you go. I see it, but I can't read it.
Why, too small or what?
It's too small, yeah.
Boy, it's big on my screen. Let me.
Do you think it would be worthwhile to just go through how this is organized and then zero in on the
Yeah.
green and the yellows? Okay, so just ground us again on how this is organized, and then we'll
Okay,
zero.
I move things around for a lot. So I have columns on operations, right? This is the operational savings. Well, the operational cost really is assuming saving is so this is yearly this is 10-year projections, and these operational numbers were just updated by Russ, and they include, hopefully you can see these now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Everything down to the buildings that might be vacated, right? These are the so
Do
that's
these include utilities and I mean,
yes.
it's all
Yes.
in? These are all
Well,
in?
Russ, and these numbers are up from the last time you saw them. So I think
Yeah,
this,
I added the labor cost in there, for all the buildings that was missing previously.
What do you mean labor costs?
Staff. Every building has a staff cost associated with it for cleaning, maintaining. The numbers that were in there before were just for product and outsourcing, not for actual Concord staff.
yeah, it's maintenance cost, staff maintenance.
Maintenance staff, great, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
So that's, and I've summed these columns. So that's with these numbers of those buildings, it's about $1 million per year, about $10 million over 10 years just to operate those buildings. The next set of columns, D and E, are assessments. These are the building assessments. We still don't have the land and the building separate here, but for that entire property, which includes the building and the land. In most cases, that makes sense, but in the case of, let's say, Ripley, it may make sense to kind of split those out if you're going to, if we're going to think about that in several parcels. But the assessment costs are there, and I just have some. I haven't summed up the assessment cost because it doesn't make sense. There's a land column here which I haven't filled in yet. The appraisal numbers, which are new, and Judith and I had to have a conversation on here, and there are really a lots of assumptions here. The assumption here with the sale of any of these properties is that they'll be used for housing. Why is that? Because the appraisal values that are really based on zoning, whether they're residential B or C, and what the intensity of the lots are. So without going into a lot of detail, what I did with those numbers that Judith and I talked, I came up with a midpoint number. And this should be a range of these numbers, but these are sort of ballpark mid-range numbers, assuming the sale of those properties for housing. And looking at the
So
left,
housing is a building lot, right?
excuse me?
When you say housing, you mean the market value of a building lot?
Well, the sum total of the market of the building lots, whether it's half acre lots or
Right.
quarter acre lots.
Okay, got it. Okay.
There's a range there.
I want to interrupt you for a minute. Sven, you got your hand up. You want to add something here?
Let him finish.
Okay.
Okay.
Let him finish on appraisal, and then I have something on appraisal.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
then the appraisal numbers, there are three things in here. It's the sale of the property, then the revenues, yearly revenues based on housing, and then 10-year revenue potential. And this is based on current tax rates applied. So the bottom line of these numbers is about $40 million worth of.
Paul, this is jumping around a lot. Is there any way that you could just have the headings stay?
Okay, well, I want to show you yeah,
Oh,
okay.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm jumping.
Yeah.
I summed these up. So the headings are, and I'll keep it at headings, there's the sale, and the tax revenues.
Okay, great.
10 years.
Okay,
Then
you can,
there's a leasing column. So we don't sell those properties. We lease them at
yep,
$30 a square foot. This could be 25 or 30. This number's moved around. So there's a square footage for each of these buildings. And so I just applied a $30 a square foot number. And then I did that over 10-year rental projections. The next set of columns, which is more related to the new buildings, but the capital cost of renovation. I did not, to your status quo comment, the only number I have, I was jumping around, is for Ripley on here. In other words, if the renovations that would be needed at Ripley to keep Ripley operating as Ripley. Okay. The other
got it.
numbers, I
Yep.
don't have any capital renovation costs for any of the municipal buildings because I don't know if there are any plans for those. So that this isn't a complete column for the vacated buildings. It is a column down below for the consolidation buildings.
Good. I get it. So you have, in other words, if we don't consolidate, right, we haven't quantified any capital investments we might need to make in, say, Kai's Road within the next 10 years.
Right, right.
Okay.
These are
Okay.
all, I have all these at NA and I'm scrolling down here. I'm sorry. So you'll see for the new buildings, I have a lot of numbers for the new
Got it.
building.
Okay. Okay, good.
And then the last organization, and I moved all the money stuff to the left here because the spreadsheet had a mix. Then I have qualitative criteria, which we have not discussed, Mary, yet.
Right.
Productivity impact, customer service impact, each building, and this is basically the consolidation targets. How flexible can we use them for multiple spaces? For example, an office building would be difficult to use for preschool, so there'd be less flexibility in an office building. And then the staffing impact again, and these are qualitative judgments. The other criteria, which applies more to the new buildings, are there competing interests? For example, Peabody, you'll see below, yeah, we could sell it, we could lease it. There are competing interests for those. And then there's some other data here in this other column here, which is just some of the basic data. The program space, numbers of staff, and this is an important column. Column R is pretty important. The total acreage, building square feet, which I've used for some of the leasing numbers. And just to scroll down on the staff, you see why that's important is right now there's 131 staff and that's rough. Could be 100, could be 135, but there's more than 100 staff that are possible to move from those vacated buildings and from townhouse and these are to be determined whether staff would move from these existing buildings. But
Right.
in discussions, yes, there would be some move of town staff. So that number way over here and it's jumping around, there are 18 there. So that's the upper part of the matrix. And just to finish this, the lower part is very similar on the headings. But there are some holes here obviously for 2229 Main Street, we don't have anything there because we could come up with a new building cost based on square footage. We don't have that yet. That's what the color coding is here.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
renovation cost for Peabody, Ripley, and this is a new row here. 21 is a new row. Okay, purchase of an office building. We've had some discussion whether that's feasible. I put it in the mix here along with,
Okay.
and so the leasing option, you've seen that before. This is based on numbers of staff and square feet. So the headings for that bottom are similar, but not exactly the same. Some of these are NA. We won't be selling these. We'd be using these. And there would be tax revenues because we'd be consolidating into them. So, the important column here is column K, which I've tried to caveat here because as a public document, there are ranges, there are rough estimates. But you'll see in all of these options right now, without the refinements that we talked about earlier for Peabody, and Peabody is road 19 here. Yeah. So there's a range, and the ranges are, they're not dissimilar. I don't have a range here for the leasing option. If we lease the building, we probably would have to renovate it. All right, we couldn't just move into it. We'd have to spend some costs, whether, we'd have to figure out who's paying for those costs, but that's why there's question marks there. So
Good.
that's, and these are the data we were just talking about here, right? The Peabody renovation costs,
Right.
which is now a range, which is based on a range of square foot estimates from that Russ has come up with and that we received from other school conversion buildings from other municipalities that we have data on that. So they all kind of fit right now into that range. It'd be good to kind of verify this range or to get a more accurate number for Peabody. Ripley, we're still carrying that as a consolidation possibility, although we may want to take that off. We've taken off the Warden's building, that's no longer on here. And the leasing option, and I have a lot of notes here where the data comes from. So yeah. I'll just want to show that in summing these numbers, everybody has their hands raised. So
Yeah, I'd like to hear from people.
yeah, so the revenue potential from sales is not insignificant. The revenue potential from leasing, which is 28 million over 10 years. There are revenues to be gained from these properties, significant revenues once we vacate them. And there's significant operational savings over here, 10 million over 10 years to be made. So
Right.
anyway, it's data. It's
Thank you.
it's
Thank
getting
you.
better, but it's, we need to work on it. So
Well, it might be time to, again, kind of embed. First of all, thank you for this. It's really well organized and it clearly shows where we need we need to get tighter numbers for these things. So this is very helpful. I'm wondering if we could take this data and start to make the financial model that I talked about earlier. But before we go there, let me see what hands raised. Sven, you had yours up first. Do you want to go?
Yeah, so that's more on the appraisal side. So just I think if I see this correctly, my math is correctly on the revenue potential for taxes, you went in with the land value and not with the potential housing value when these things were developed. So that needs to be adjusted. So if I look at the formula right now, it takes the land value when you sell it and multiplies it with the tax rate. But if you're developing, let's say on Peabody or Ripley, I don't know how many houses, the actually value of
Yes.
the land plus the houses is significantly higher. So you have to assume a certain density of houses there. Take whatever an average house rate, or in these cases, probably above average, but you have to start somewhere. Make the say assessed value out of the developed property, and then generate the tax income. At the moment, you're only taxing the land in that column. Yeah. So that needs to be adjusted, and that brings it significantly up, by the way. Then
yeah, I'm taxing the land based on an assumption of housing density.
no,
So
you're
No, it's
taking, if
just
I go in the Peabody, the formula is taking the $10 million of the sale of the land, multiplies it with the tax rate. If you
and
go in the formula,
we're missing the value of the tax revenue we get from the housing
that is getting developed on top of it.
that we would assume would be developed.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the value of 10 million is only the value the town achieves for the land. When a developer develops, they add the houses on top of it, and then they sell the house for $2 million each. That's more or less the value per house. So you have to go in to say, how many houses can you put on Peabody? if you zone it, let's say residential B, and then get the total assessed value that includes the house value.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to look into sort of zoning dependency,
Yes.
number of lots,
And
value.
that
Yeah, I
is
know.
also that's why you have the ranges, and you talk quickly about it. That also depends on what the town can achieve on a property sale, depending on how it is zoned. Because it's different if they take, like today, Peabody is residential AA. That's minimum 2 acres per lot. You're not getting a lot for that. But if you're taking it as residential B, that's half an acre per lot. So a developer is much more likely to pay you a bigger price. And I
Well,
think
let me ask you, what zoning assumptions should we make? Or I'd rather not have 3 different values for that. So what should we make?
well,
a
you have to
assumption?
disclose. So I think is ideally for the town would be the residential B for the tax revenue, but you have to bring this zoning change through town meeting. Yeah, so that's a comment and a risk factor you have to consider, and you have to consider if that is feasible or not. On another factor which you probably should not take into account, but you should have somewhere back in your memory. Let's say Ripley is close to a sewer. If the town is successful to get more sewer connectivity or the sewer capacity approved with the MCI activities, this whole development could be connected to potentially to sewer because the capacity could be there. Then the the value of the land goes significantly up because the developer doesn't need to invest into septic systems. Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. I would not calculate on this right now, but it helps to understand the broader picture across the town, what positive impacts sewer connection can have.
Just to add to that, though, Peabody has 2 acres dedicated to sewer already. So that's something we should keep in mind about Peabody.
So I think I had a conversation with you, Judith, as far as the value of that land, given the availability of the septic, and you mentioned that it's not entirely, it would have to be reconfigured. Why isn't the septic system at Peabody directly applicable to housing?
Because there's already a structure there, so a developer has marginal cost in connecting to the septic there.
I recall, and I know Russ is
Waiting.
with us, but I recall that there was something about the septic design that was related to the use and that it would have to be upgraded for residential use. That's just me remembering a comment that somebody made. And so I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I was just raising that as a potential issue, that there'd have to be some kind of adjustment done to the septic that is offsite.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Sven, for that correction on the matrix. That is something. And then, yeah, the sewer, we're going to have to work that in somehow to the financials. So that's I flagged that on my notes. Russ, do you want to say what would you like to say?
Yeah, I got an 11 o'clock hard stop, but I just wanted to toss in the 2020 study has capital costs for every building that it looked at for different levels of renovation.
Thank you.
Low, mid, and new construction. So there are capital costs that were created from 2020 study. Of course, we have to extrapolate inflationary pressures and other pressures on that to get a proper number. So those numbers are readily available with some massaging.
Good.
The septic over at Peabody, fully functioning system. It's right now, I think Melanie told me it was rated for like 102 bedrooms or something to that effect, as far as just the size that it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying we'd have 102 bedrooms over there, but any redevelopment of that site naturally that system may or may not go with it because wastewater treatment plant operators have their sight on that for possible future use in the area.
Say that again?
That may be a future use site for the wastewater treatment side of the business. Alan would know more about that. There was some early talk about that, so I wouldn't exactly think we're giving that site up until we clear that with Alan and the wastewater treatment people. That 2-acre parcel.
Well, right now that belongs to the town, right? And so,
Yes, right.
so you're saying that the,
Yeah. I'm saying it may not go hand in hand with the Peabody parcel unless, wastewater treatment says they're not going to have any future use for that space.
what would
As
they use it for though? Oh, we don't have to.
I don't know. Yeah,
We don't
I
have to
heard
do this now. Okay,
some conversations. I'm just
thanks for the
flagging
heads up.
everybody knows the same stuff everybody else knows.
Got it. Thanks for the heads up.
All right, I gotta go to my weekly team meeting, and if you have any questions, please give me a call or drop me an email.
Thank you,
Thank
Russ. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later.
So Mary, I think back to Peabody, I think getting the renovation costs through a sort of rigorous assessment and getting the value of the potential sale, this number here, and the tax number related to that. These two numbers I think are very important to kind of get at the same level as the renovation costs. I think getting those on the same what's it called, the level of confidence in the numbers. Because both of these are now estimates. I think to Sven's point, this number needs to be thought about, and we need to look at the lot size and housing. And I think Judith, if we can get a formal appraisal, I thought we had a formal appraisal of Peabody. Mary, did he not do that? Did the town not do that?
No, we did not. We
Never
did
did
not.
that.
We talked about it. We did talk about it. We asked the CFO to move ahead with that, but that didn't happen. So we do not. Okay, so there are some wrinkles here, which is what kind of zoning are we going to assume when we figure out what we think the market value is to sell some of these properties? That's one wrinkle. Sven, being a member of the DPW or the commission, can you shed any light on the availability of that 2-acre parcel for septic capacity for the Peabody site?
Unfortunately not. I think I have to dig on that one.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah, it'd be good to know. As you pointed out, coming with or without a septic makes a big difference on the value of that land.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'd need to know that. Judith, you have your hand up. What would you like to say?
Sorry, very, very quickly, with regard to getting the full market appraisals for Peabody, Ripley, Kai's, and a couple of other properties. I'm assuming that once we get approval from the Land Use Working Group full committee next week, that those will be our first priority. So you should have those, I would think, fairly quickly. They will rely a little bit on zoning categories, so it'll be a range again, but we'll have that data for you, I think, relatively quickly.
Good, great. Good news. Thank you.
Yeah, and remember what I have in here for Harvey Wheeler. I'm not sure why I didn't update that, Judith. I think you gave me some numbers on Harvey Wheeler. So not all these numbers are updated. The bolded numbers are updated based on the rough appraisal numbers that you and I discussed. I have two questions. The Knox Trail, Mary, I believe the assessment numbers that Meredith gave you and that you passed on had 39 Knox Trail. Can you check to see if we have this information on 37 Knox Trail? Now, it's in Acton. Is that what you?
Yeah. Yeah, I forget now, but I do remember talking with, I forget the details, but I do remember talking with her about that. And
Okay, maybe that's why we don't have that.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why we don't have it, because we don't own it.
We don't own that building?
I'm not sure. I'll have to look again.
Okay. And the other question I had, 24 Court Lane, is that on cemetery property?
Yeah, well, it's on town-owned land that includes the cemetery and that small building, yes. So in conversations I've had with Kerry, the ability to, carve that off and sell it is not, she wasn't interested in that at all and thought it would be a very good place to lease, rent
Right.
out that space. And in fact, the retirement board, we even have a potential tenant for that. So that's the story with
Okay.
Court Lane.
Okay, so just on the overall organization, I think, am I hearing that we're missing anything here? I'm hearing that some numbers have to be adjusted. I don't think I'm missing any important columns. Uh,
No, Paul, I want to go back to what I brought up earlier about how we're going to actually, frame and structure the economic analysis.
yeah.
We've got all this data and now we've got to, quantify it and figure out what makes sense economically. I see Shannon's got her hand up. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to ask Shannon. Shannon, what?
Hi, Mary. I just wanted to let you know that me and Megan are gonna have to log off for an 11 too, but that
Okay.
you and Paul, Judith, and Sven are all co-hosts.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
See you later. Where was I? Oh, okay. Um,
Let's
yes.
just let's talk just the bottom here. I want to make sure we have everything here. Um, I guess 2229 stays on this, but um I'm not sure how serious an effort we should put into this new building cost on it for municipal purposes. If you think we ought to keep it on there, Mary, we'll keep it on, but
For now,
for now, okay.
I felt good about taking off the warden's building, but for now, let's just keep it as a placeholder.
Okay. So Peabody's still on there. Consolidation to Ripley is still on there. Although there's not a there seems to be more enthusiasm of the value of that property for other purposes.
Hmm.
Um, Purchase of an office building, I think, is we're in an exploratory stage. I'll characterize it as that. And the leasing option is still kind of on there. So I think,
That's good.
yeah, we have everything we
I'm
need
good with that. Yep, I'm good with
there.
that for now.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. Should I stop sharing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I would like to hear people's opinions on how to actually frame out the economic analysis. And I floated the idea earlier of, starting by quantifying the status quo, which would be the costs to operate and any capital improvements we see for the next 10 years on the facilities we are, occupying now. And we'd also have to show in the status quo what the revenue we would generate by selling Peabody, because it would be status quo, it just stays there. So these are questions that I think as we frame this out and start, quantifying some of this information we have, we'll probably have more questions, but I think we've got a lot of data to get us going. I'd like to hear from people. What do you think about that approach?
Well, let me just ask you a question, definition of status quo. So status quo would be we don't do consolidation, or is it we don't do consolidation for some period of time? Is it
We don't do consolidation
at all? Okay.
at all. We stay as we are right now. Um, we keep the buildings we have, we operate them, we improve them as we need to. We've got some, but the tricky part there is, yeah, but what do we do about Peabody? The status quo means we have this piece of property that we have to do something with, and one of the options would be we sell it. So that's where I think that the value we get from that would be in the status quo scenario.
Yeah, I agree, because if you don't consolidate, the Peabody is surplus property.
Exactly. Yeah. So that would be going forward with the way things are right now. And that's our baseline. And then against that, we would compare different scenarios. And some of the benefits from consolidation would apply to any scenario, and some of them wouldn't. So that's how again, this is just a broad framework. As I start populating it, or whoever does this, whoever starts populating this with dollars, we might need more data, or we might need to refine some data. But I think we're ready to do that. What do you think, Paul?
I think, yeah, I think that's the next step, taking the matrix and converting that to a to to two pieces, the status quo pieces and the consolidation pieces, pulling that together and filling that with numbers. And then we look at those numbers and figure out where we need better numbers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I think we're ready. I do. And again, we'll probably find out as we do this that, oh my gosh, we forgot this category of expenses or whatever, and or we need better numbers. Sven,
just be last question. The matrix we haven't filled in the qualitative pieces of that.
that's right.
I don't think the only piece that might bear on the economic analysis is the some productivity
That's right.
assessment. And have you thought more about that?
I have, and I've got three data points for different, hours that people spend traveling back and forth. And it depends upon obviously their role within town staff. So I don't have a good idea of how to quantify that yet, but I would like to quantify it because if we don't put it in there, we're missing an important benefit. So that's my way of saying I'm thinking about it, but I haven't figured it out.
Yeah, but a productivity assessment would be not in the status quo, would be in the consolidation because you
Exactly.
want, right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the status quo is not dependent on any qualitative, the
It-
economic analysis, not dependent on any of the qualitative columns. Yeah, got it.
right. Right. That would be a saving, in one of the scenarios.
Right.
Move
Right.
to Peabody, move to Ripley, build at 2229 Main, whatever. But that's where I'd like to start.
Yeah.
Sven, you want to add something?
Yeah, I have 2 points. I think a status quo that gives you the baseline. You have to have that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It also informs you along the timeline. Let's say in 5 years from now, the town would buy an office building as a scenario. It
Hmm.
gives you the baseline. What is the running cost till you reach that point in time?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that helps you. So the baseline needs to be there.
Yes.
One thing in the status quo, I think you will need to understand is the school's plans for Ripley. If the status quo stays, you need to understand what is the school planning to put into Ripley over the next 10 to 15 or 20 years.
Oh gosh. Okay. First of all, you just extended the timeline. I noticed that.
Yeah, but what you need to understand what's their plan if it's a status quo. Yeah, right now I think there's a willingness in a consolidation scenario, let's say for Peabody or whatever, to consolidate that in and Ripley becomes available. But what are the costs with respect to renovation and so on? And we know the building has significant issues. So what is their plan on a status quo?
Well, there is a report. I forget what the date of that report. There is an
Yeah, that
analysis.
report says that the building is far outside of the usable age and is only showing cost for to bridge 5 years, and that's about $8 million. That's last year money, so it doesn't tell us what's coming after 5 years. That column is empty in the report.
So the status quo should take us out to 10 years. Is that
Well, now I'm hearing we should go further. Let's talk about that.
uh,
No, if I see only 5 years of course.
It's not going to show a benefit. Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's think besides how we want to manipulate the numbers. How far out should we be thinking? Just strategically. I mean, if we're
I think 10 years sounds reasonable. What planning, our capital planning as a town goes out, how many years?
what capital planning?
I know. Well, I've seen
Sorry.
Flintstone put together
Those
something
lies.
that takes us out 10 years. I mean, yeah, what capital planning? I think
Well, wait, okay, what did the 2020, how far out did the 2020 study go when they forecasted I forget that. Okay, I'll look at that.
I think 10 years is a good horizon.
I think
And then
maybe
if you identify things that are left over, just let's pick on Ripley because I brought it up, is if you're saying is the 8 million turns out to be enough for 10 years, but there are question marks what's happening after that, then that's a finding too. Yeah.
well, let's ask FinCom or Kathy now or Kathy later. What's FinCom's recommendation on that type of status quo projection?
Kathy Kokolo?
Yeah.
Great,
Well,
Kathy.
are you there?
You have any recommendations for us on how far out we should go for capital planning? She must have stepped away.
Yeah.
Sven, do you remember how far out the 2020 report went?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember.
We all at the moment try to plan for 10 years on a capital plan.
Yep.
But given
Yeah,
this year is a horizon, we know MCI will take forever to come to fruition, and other things. This is an extreme long timeline. We have to think at the moment. I don't want to complicate what you're doing. I'm just concerned of status quo. We have one building where we don't know what the plan is for a period over 5 years from now on. Yeah, and that's Ripley.
Okay.
right. But I'm just thinking, I think 10 years is reasonable. I think 10 years from now, just project, I think there will have been a development and investment in MCI. 10 years from now, if we own 2229, there will be development and investment. So it's not, we're not blue skying a lot of this. It's in the range when things need to be planned and happen. So I don't know, just it seems reasonable.
Nick, you got your hand up. Nick, I think you're muted. I'll jump over to Judith and come back to you, Nick. Judith, what would you like
Oh,
to?
sure. Just on the timeline, I think
Yeah.
that there can be a little bit of there is a distinction between a 10-year analysis that is used to guide decision making
Mhm.
versus understanding the 10 years as a phasing analysis, where is there 5 years where you're in an existing building and then in year 6 you move into a building that has a 30-year lifespan, right? So those are two different types of analysis, and I think that 10 years is the framework that we're using for analyzing the fiscal impacts of specific decisions.
Mhm.
Whereas then we have, we're proposing new buildings, renovations, et cetera, that they themselves have longer time horizons. So I don't want to conflate the two, right? So
Okay.
10 years is perfectly appropriate as a decision-making framework and understanding, annual costs and that sort of thing, but then not getting confused with the idea that different buildings have different time spans or different expected life cycles.
Thank you. Thank you. That helps. I
Well,
think,
to your point, we haven't talked about phasing. It's sort of a phase. It's not the baseline is status quo. The phasing is either we do it in one phase. We're moving to a consolidation, but we're doing it in one step or 3 steps. So probably at some point, Mary, we're going to have to talk about phasing. I've asked several people what would be the first buildings to move out of and consolidate. And Kai's Road comes up right at the top of that because of the value of that property and for other things. And then, there are other pieces, and then Ripley comes up secondly because of the value of that property. So there might be logical phasing to that. We'll have to think about whether that makes sense to do an
yeah.
economic analysis and phasing. So that's just adding to the burden of baseline and then total consolidation. But
Well, I think for
Hey,
now,
this is Kathy Tupelo. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
hi.
The Zoom had been locking me out of both video and audio, so I was having trouble answering
sorry.
you.
You're right. You're right, Kathy. I just fixed that. Sorry about that. Thank you. So glad
So
you're here.
So just wanted you to know that I am here and I have been listening, and you all are doing a tremendous amount of work. And I, I mean, I'm fascinated and following along. So the question I hear is, do we go beyond 10 years in
Mhm.
the financial analysis? Why don't I take that away and come back to you? Mary or Judith, I don't know which committee I'm going to get back to on this, but
You can
Get back.
you can get back to anybody.
okay, great. All right. I'll take a look at it. Personally, my initial impression is that to go further than 10 years really makes uh, projections even less reliable. I mean, it just, at
Yep.
a point in time, right? It is too many variables. But let me take that away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I've also been able to unmute Nick. So Nick, do you have something that you'd like to add?
Yeah, a couple things on the issue that Sven brought up about zoning for Peabody. I think you have to assume the current zoning of that neighborhood. We don't have a great track record of getting zoning changes through town meeting, in my experience. So I think you have to use that as the baseline and then have a separate thing that shows what it could be if you were able to change the zoning.
Mhm.
Second, I assume you're taking into account site parking for moving all those administrative people to Peabody. That's that. But also, and very important, the traffic impact on the neighborhood of moving all the admin people to Peabody. This is already a neighborhood that has the new middle school there. And if you've ever been near there, when the parents show up, either in the morning or in the afternoon to pick up kids or whoever shows up, there's quite a bit of traffic, and you're going to get that as a neighborhood concern. Finally, I didn't ever hear that anyone's taken into a cost. If you're selling off Ripley or whatever you do, if the building has to come down, where are the demolition costs factored in?
Yep.
Because if there are any materials in there that are a problem, it's going to make it expensive. That's all.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Those are some helpful suggestions. Judith, you want to respond?
So very quickly, Nick, great points. And yes, the traffic is obviously going to be an issue, even though Peabody's already absorbed a middle school in the past. So they've had a little bit of a respite, but that's a big deal. And also we have been proxying for demolition costs as part of our preliminary costing. And I did want to mention that I think one of the things that all of the subgroups are going to have to factor in when they think about their 10-year timeframe, and Kathy, I'm going to be interested to hear what recommendations you pass along to us from FinCom. But none of this is going to happen super quickly, right? So the first 5 years of any 10-year analysis from any of the subgroups is going to involve, approvals, design, studies, construction, even Peabody, we're not moving in there tomorrow, right? So the first 5 years of a lot of our scenario building is going to be an extension of the status quo, because in many cases, we're not going to, new buildings are not going to appear, or renovated spaces are not going to appear overnight. So, there's some argument, if we're going to do a fiscal impact analysis, that you would look at years 5 to 15 instead of years 0 to 5, et cetera. So we can talk about that, but I think that, certainly thinking about timing, which is related to, but slightly more nuanced or less nuanced than phasing, right? Which the phasing conversation you guys were having is relevant. So these are all the details that we're looking at as we move a little bit more forward in everybody's analysis. But one way, Mary, I saw you just go like, oh my God, now I've got to think about 5 to 15. Well, one way to do it, just to make it consistent across all groups, is to assume that year 1 is the year at which some kind of change in the plan,
Yes.
right? Whereas everybody is in this, 3 to 5 year holding period of, with the fire stations, et cetera. We're not building or renovating overnight. We have approvals. We have, all these sorts of things to be done. So yeah, so we could assume that year 1 is really year 3 or year 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 things I'd like to say to that. Number one, Paul, have we put into the matrix when we talk about the market value of certain properties, have we netted that against the costs to demo, like Ripley or Peabody?
Yeah, it's in, well, the information that Judith has that we have to kind of, work on, it has that in there.
So,
Uh,
okay, so it's net of it. It's not what what we'd get to sell these lots. It's net of what we'd get after we demoed it, or net of what the developer would pay if they were going to demolish it themselves.
Yeah, so then the next iteration of this, whether it's the status quo or whether it's the future, we have to make certain assumptions about zoning, certain assumptions about number of houses, certain assumptions about tax revenues. So we're gonna have to, it's not in there right now. What, if you see a number of 10 million, that's only because I've looked at the range that Judith and I kind of stuck it in the middle.
Okay,
But
okay.
we're
Just
gonna have to be, and so for example, in Peabody, the status quo number, we're gonna have to have three zoning assumptions, I think, current zoning, B and C, because, I, I think I would not just sit on the current zoning assumption.
I understand, but whatever scenario we choose, whatever the zoning is, and even I'd like to throw in a PRD in that as well as a possibility. The numbers we have would be net of the demolition of Peabody, right?
Right, but
That we get,
if we sold the property, we would not be paying for the demolition.
but do our numbers include what the market value would be given that somebody, in this case, you're assuming the developer would
Yeah,
have to demolish
yep,
it? I
yep.
Okay,
It should be in,
just
yeah.
to be clear. Okay, great. And then Judith, to your point earlier about, the timeline and the phasing, typically when I've done these type of analyses, year zero is not tied to a a particular calendar year. It's just year zero. It's like when we finally trigger this event, how would how do the cash flows change? So that kind of takes away from us the pressure of trying to realistically estimate, is it going to be, FY 32 or is it going to be FY 29? So that's how I was hoping to approach this. I want to get back to something that Sven said earlier, where I think we need to find out from the schools what their plan is for Ripley. That's an
Yeah.
action item. I wish Tracy was here because I'd like to, Paul, would you mind contacting Tracy and seeing if we can get that in motion? I know we talked about it earlier, and because I remember talking about it when we are at Ripley actually, and asking, what are your plans for this building? And not just what are you using it for now, but what's the future? Can we kind of get
Yeah,
something from,
I will,
that would be good.
I'll get that to her.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. Um, what's on the agenda? Other data and staff updates. I think we're good with that. So I think what the next step, but I still see Kathy and Nick's hands up. I assume.
Yeah, this is
Oh,
Kathy.
go ahead.
I had a comment that I wanted to add on the financial analysis
Yep.
regarding the tax revenue that could be generated if properties were sold and housing put in.
Mhm.
I think that we should be conservative in that, for example, if it was the Peabody area, that's, current residential. We shouldn't be baking in more density into our plans because that would inflate the potential revenue. So I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you, Paul.
Well, Kathy, I think what we're envisioning right now is possibly looking at three different types of zoning. One would be existing, and then how would that change if we were if we were willing to go to town meeting and ask for the zoning to be changed. So, I think we'll see how complex we want this to be, but I think we'll accommodate that as far as,
So
Yeah,
you'll show both two results.
well, or maybe
well,
three.
there's several. I think the value of that property certainly will increase will change with zoning. And I think we're not
Absolutely.
making decisions right now, but I think we want to offer that analysis. Um,
Okay, so I think we've done a lot of work today. I've got other things I've got to go do. So I think so some action items I got is, Paul, you're going to check with Tracy to find out what the plan for Ripley is. I will attempt to put together baseline financials based on the information that, Paul, you've already collected in that matrix. And, probably get stuck somewhere and we'll talk about it at our next meeting. So does that sound? And yeah, and so we've also got to look at the 2020 capital study to look at what they estimated for capital renovations that some of these buildings would need if we don't in fact vacate them. And we'd have to bump that up with some kind of
Right.
big, I
And
mean,
the,
the
uh, the,
the MCI advisory board was bumping up the construction cost by as much as 40% because of COVID and tariffs. So I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. Um,
I think the other analysis we need is sort of on the tax revenue side of the vacated properties. To Sven's point, we need to figure out, based on the numbers, Judith, that you've given me already, it's sort of numbers of houses, value of houses, tax revenues from those potential houses. With certain assumptions. I'll start with assuming certain things, and we can review those assumptions.
Good.
But I'll
If
refine
you
that.
documented those assumptions too, Paul, that would, I think, because some of those numbers, we see the number, right? And behind it are five critical assumptions. So you use your judgment as far as what are some things we might want to, revisit so that we're getting a little bit of depth to the numbers that we're showing on the matrix. Anyway, okay. I think we've done a lot. It's a pleasure working with all of you. Um, I think we've got a meeting with the broader group on Friday, and then we meet 2 weeks from today. So if anybody has anything else they'd like to add, I'm willing to entertain a motion to adjourn.
We're good.
We're good. Okay. Do you want to move to adjourn, Paul?
I'll move to adjourn.
Great. And I'll second it. It's a unanimous. Thank you, everybody.